that? Just a couple seconds. Okay. All right, so welcome. Thanks for coming. I thought maybe 2 people were going to show up, so this is great to see everybody here.
Well, these people all know each other.
I see. There was a phone tree. Got it. So just some quick background about me. My name is Lauren Eggleston. I am the Regional Education Coordinator for the Thousand Islands region. If you have any reason that you need to get in touch with me, my email address is right there, and I'll have it out at the end of the talk as well. I'm an environmental educator. I come to this by having a master's of science in structural geology because I thought I was going to work in mines for my whole life. And then I found parks, and mines went away and parks happened. I started working at parks as a college student. I actually worked at the Sackets Harbor Battlefield first. And favorite parks, we did kind of talk about this. I did top 5 here. So we already talked a bit about Southwick, has that big ocean feel. Wellesley Island because I was there, Point Roche because I love the nature center out there, Higley Flow because it feels like the Adirondacks, and Rock Island Lighthouse because it's a lighthouse. Who doesn't love one of those? Okay, so just kind of talking about how this talk is going to run. I used to teach undergrad, and so there will be a pop quiz at the end, so you're all prepared for this. But we're going to do a quick overview of the Thousand Islands region, and then we're going to dive into the history of parks in this area, but also across the state. So we'll kind of cover 1850s to 1920 first, and then this is the Centennial year, so 1920s, 1924 is when parks were established, so we'll talk about the 100 years that we're covering, and then, this is everybody's favorite part, there's a short break. So if you need to use the washroom, if you need to get a glass of water, if you need to stand up and stretch, that is your opportunity to do it. And then we'll transition into the second part of the talk, and that's kind of like choose your own adventure. Okay, so this is going to be more about like what parks are accessible by boat, talking about some of the parks that are right here on the St. Lawrence. I did pick one that was a little bit farther away, so you need a bigger boat to get to it. And then time for question and discussion. Though I will say I like interactive talks. So if you have questions or if you want to talk about something or if you have a memory from a place, feel free to chime in at any point. If you go on too far with your memory, I will cut you off. Even more. Okay. And then I also like talking about the pictures because lots of times people put pictures up and then they don't actually say what they are. So this one, anybody know what park this is? Keyen. Yeah. So this is one of the picnic pavilion at Keyen. This, any guesses to what park this is in?
Whetstone, no?
Whetstone, yeah. So this is the AmeriCorps crew this year, the Trails crew. And they put in, we've been calling it the WPA style wall, but they put in a retaining wall this year to help with erosion. But the Conservation Corps, AmeriCorps, and Parks have this really rich history that sort of entwines itself in the 100 years. So they're up there. And then this one, Wellesley, yeah. Anybody know who this educator is in the red hat? It's not me. She's been there for a really long time and she just moved to Southwick. Anybody know Kim Cullen? Yeah, that's her. Okay. So park regions in New York State. New York State, okay, so the official title is New York State Parks, Recreation and Historic Systems, OPRHP. Office of Preservation. Yes, thank you. You can tell I'm a little nervous. Anyway, it's divided into 12. We are number 10, the Thousand Islands. We're kind of like packed. And a lot of people don't realize that we go all the way over to Lake Champlain. Here is the slide of all of the parks in our region. We're known for some of the best boating and fishing in the world. And our watersheds include Eastern Lake Ontario, the St. Lawrence River, and Lake Champlain. You would be correct in saying that these are all part of the Great Lakes Basin. But yes, so we've got parks. We cover 5 different counties, and we have parks in 4 of them. And the 5th one, we're almost there. We're working on it. And then I'm trying not to wander too much here, but the pinkish star, that's where our headquarters is. Most of the state agencies are headquartered in Watertown. We're up by Alex Bay. So, okay, Now you got to start using your imagination a bit and start asking, like, how did we get here? Because the park system as we know it today is, like, we all kind of take it for granted. We know that parks are there. We know that they're open to the public. It's affordable to get into them. We have 26 state parks in our region, 2 golf courses, 1 historic site. We also have 4 nature centers. We have 5 if you count McAndry, which is in Robert Moses State Park, but it is run by the New York Power Authority. We've got 9 beaches, 1 outdoor swimming pool, which is at Keyen, lots of boat ramps, canoe launches, skiing trails, snowshoeing trails. We've got things that you can do outside all season long. So one of the big things about parks is that they are accessible year round. You might not be able to camp at them, but they are accessible. So in these photos, this is Southwick Beach up here in the summertime. Good representation of that park. This is Higley Flow in the fall. This is Whaley in winter. This is, I think this is Cedar Point. And then this is part of one of the programs that gets run out of the Minute Anthony Common Nature Center, and that's the kayaking program. Okay, so how did we get here? Somebody had an idea a long time ago that public land was a good idea. So we start talking about what's going on at the turn of the century of the 1800s. So there was lots of industrialization. Lots of natural resources were threatened because of development. There were buildings that were historic and significant to, let's say, the Revolutionary War that were under threat because people looked at them and went, well, I can knock it down and I can build a better one. So in those early days, in the early 1800s, a lot of the focus was placed on conservation and preservation of just like, well, there's this really nice place along the Niagara River, and it's really pretty, and maybe somebody other than one person should be able to get to it. So they started, early philanthropists were saying, okay, maybe we want to work with the state. Maybe we want to make this accessible. And from 1850 to 1924, more than 35 properties were acquired by New York State across the state. So this is, national parks were established in 1916. So this is mostly pre-national parks. And places like Teganic Falls down by Cayuga, places like this, people were looking at it and saying, well, this is really beautiful. I would like to share it. This one, I think is Letchworth.
Yes, it is.
Yes, okay. This is good. I've got fact checking going on back here. Okay, so in 1850, New York takes this huge first step, and they acquire the nation's first historic site. It's Washington's headquarters down in Newburgh. So there's an old photo up here, there's a lithograph down here, and the post office even commemorated it when it only cost you 3 cents to mail something, and did Washington's headquarters. So George Washington and his staff were headquartered here during the Revolutionary War from 1782 to 1783. This is actually the location where he was stationed the longest and stayed the longest. He was there for 16 months and 19 days. He wasn't actually sleeping there the whole time. There were times where he would go off and see the front and go off and do inspections, but he was headquartered here. The house that he occupied was the Hasbrook House. You can tour it now, but it was altered to better suit the general's needs. The general had a bigger staff than the family that was living in the house. Also, it's the 1800s. What is the #1 cause of fires in the 1800s? Anybody know?
Kitchens.
Kitchens, exactly. So they moved the kitchen outside. They built a temporary kitchen. They also built a temporary ice house so that you had lots of ice. And then they enlarged the stables to suit the staff that he needed. But 1850, New York takes this big first step. And we're going to jump by decades. So in the 1860s, the Civil War happens in the beginning of the 1860s, from 1861 to 1865. And then people started thinking about, okay, there's been this war. What is our legacy? What do you leave behind? And so they started thinking about what do you leave behind for future generations? And individuals and the government together, or maybe individuals within the government, were working together to protect these areas that they saw that they wanted to share with others. So this is the Niagara Escarpment over by Buffalo. This is kind of what it was starting to look like. And people went, maybe I don't want it to look like that. We talked a bit about emphasis was really placed on conservation. They were just trying to save things from industrialization and modernization. And then the state began identifying spaces to develop, and things like the St. Lawrence Reservation, the Adirondack and Catskill Forest Preserves.
Lauren, I'm sorry, what is exactly the boundaries of the St. Lawrence Reservation? What geographic space was that?
We'll talk about that
Okay.
soon. Coming soon to a slide near you. And the Palisades Interstate Park. So these things were all happening. I think we have a couple slides before I get there. But the St. Lawrence Reservation, I'm not going to click to it right now, but we're kind of talking about like Cape Vincent to about Chippewa would be roughly the stretch that they used or designated. Okay. So then we move into the 1870s. New York State keeps acquiring land. It's mostly acquiring them. Sometimes it's purchase, sometimes it's through legislation. A lot of it was through donation, where estates, people would put it in the estate and then the estate would get transferred to the state. They didn't have a comprehensive system. There wasn't a park system yet. So often it was local commissions, local societies, or like designated operators that were running these chunks of land or historic houses. I don't remember what this one is. It's downstate. I know that much. And then we get to the 1880s, and this is the next big step. So the big thing that happened is that Niagara Falls State Park is established in 1885. And it's part of the Niagara Reservation. Niagara Falls State Park is claimed to be the oldest continuously operating state park in the nation. So that's pretty cool. It's established before National Park System happens. They had a friends group formed, the Niagara Falls Association, in 1883 to protect the falls from private exploitation. As we know, there is a big dam there. But this is Prospect Point, an old photograph of Prospect Point in 1892. You can still go and stand here, so that's pretty cool. And then Niagara Falls is also the first park to be established by eminent domain, which is an interesting thing, that they were using eminent domain to make public space in a space that we now cherish. This photograph is actually out of my family's archives. It's a tourism photo from the 1800s. And these three figures have actually been painted in. Yeah, early Photoshop. So, but this is a tourism image to give people the idea that you could also be here during the winter time. It's Buffalo, it's winter, I don't know, 12 months of the year there. So, but this is just kind of a cool comparison to see the actual versus what was going in the papers. In the 1890s, this is the golden age of the Thousand Islands. So Calumet Castle was completed in 1894. You can go out and look at all the cool exhibits here and learn more about the golden age of the Thousand Islands. But this is a picture of the St. Lawrence Reservation. So Chippewa's here, Cape's out here. And this map is from a little bit later, but the parks that were all established in 1898 are listed out here. Most of them were estates that were converted to state parks. Mary Island is a little bit different. Mary Island is actually a little bit earlier, in like 1894. It's one of the first ones, and Burnham is also one of the first. But it's cool to see, like, we're standing here in Clayton, and this is what they were doing in the 1890s. So we are definitely benefiting from their vision, which is really nifty. Okay. I didn't skip a decade. I'm sorry. There's a lot of history here. We got to get through, 100 years. So the Palisades Interstate Park Commission was created in 1900. It's a partnership between New York and New Jersey to protect the Palisades. The Palisades, that picture of what the Niagara Escarpment looked like, Palisades looked pretty similar at the time. So there was enormous interest, and it led to the creation of Bear Mountain and Harriman State Parks in 1910. Harriman's map is down here. If you can navigate by this, you are a genius. And then an early postcard of Bear Mountain State Park up here. So what we're starting to get into is this progressive era, and the ideas of that, there are a lot of people, everything's been industrialized. Lots of people are working in factories, and they're living in cities, which we viewed that as progress. But then there was also this idea of, okay, now we have all these people living in cities and they haven't seen a tree. How do we get them back out? So there's sort of these, like, industrialization happens, and then there's the push to go back to nature, and then industrialization happens and the push to go back to nature. And parks often plays a big role in this. Other things that were happening at the time, World War I happens from 1914 to 1918. It didn't impact parks in the same way that World War II does. Talk about that one soon. And then also the National Park Service is established in 1916. '20s. So this is when parks are born. This officially starts the 100-year celebration of the Parks Commission. So most states didn't even have an inkling of, like, oh, we should establish a state park. But instead, at this point, in the 1920s, New York commits to adopting the statewide park plan. Robert Moses, this is pretty much his brainchild with a couple other people. So parks are born. So we've had that emphasis on conservation. It's like, we need to conserve, we need to conserve, we need to conserve. And suddenly in the 20s, there was this big push to say, okay, we've conserved it. Now we need to get people to recreate in it. What does that look like? What is recreation? How do we encourage people to do it? Down here, we've got a photo of roadways. So the automobile is starting to become a big factor. Starting. There are a couple people who are saying, this is going to be big. People are going to come to parks by car. They're not going to use trains. We should probably deal with this and build some roads. And then the first state-run nature center, Bear Mountain State Park, Trailside Museum and Zoo, still open today, was established in 1920. It was a Boy Scout camp at first. You could feed bears. Don't do it now. But by 1927, they were educating guests on local environment, geology, and the history of the park. And this nature center sort of set the groundwork for all the other nature centers that were to come. Any questions so far?
So what role did Teddy Roosevelt play in all this?
Oh, I'm so glad you asked. Well, Franklin Roosevelt. I'll tell you, the Franklin.
No, but back in the 1890s, Teddy Roosevelt was very active in New York politics, making governor.
Yes.
And it looks like he just had started this in New York and then did the national parks.
Yes. Yes. Did I get the Roosevelts confused? Franklin? Yeah. So he develops the economic relief programs. Do I have them? Do I have the two Roosevelts confused?
No, you got it right.
No, okay. So he develops the economic relief programs. He starts CCC, which is the Civilian Conservation Corps. And he was governor of New York from 1928 to 1932, elected president in 1932. And when he became president was really when he got a lot of this going. In the steps before that, in the 20s, he was active in New York politics and was sort of helping Robert Moses get things off the ground. Civilian Conservation Corps, so this eventually will develop into the SCA and the Youth Corps. But this is an effort after the Great Depression to lift the US back up. A lot of the development in the 1930s was largely due to the Civilian Conservation Corps. The two best examples in our area is in Cedar Point and Cream Point. Both pavilions there are built by the Civilian Conservation Corps. The one at Cedar Point is built out of limestone, and the one at Cream Point is built out of Boston sandstone. I know you're a geologist, so there you go. This is also when the rustic aesthetic of parks is developed. So a lot of this was pulled from national park system, but also Adirondack great camps, arts and crafts movement, Swiss and Norwegian building traditions, and particularly here, all of those castles that got built. So the stonework that you see in parks around this area gets pulled from that. In the 1940s, okay, so World War II, it's gonna happen. In the 1940s, parks, in 1942, parks reported a 20 to 60% drop in visitation. They had been at about 20 million people. They dropped down to about 10. So big drop. National and state resources were diverted to the war effort. And I'm actually going to skip ahead one slide and then we'll go back. What parks were doing during the wartime was basically trying to create these tranquil areas where people could get away from the war. And they didn't have to think about it, or they could distract their kids at it. So they were trying to create like R&R areas. So much so that it got put in the annual report in 1943. And then parks remained open, but often they were in need of repair. So they would close sections of them, particularly downstate. They would close sections of them. They were very short-staffed until the end of the war. So they might only be able to do like shortened hours, or it might be a swim at your own risk. Just different ways of dealing with what was going on in the world at the time. There was one park established in our region during the 1940s, and that was Whetstone Gulf. It was established, but it didn't get opened. So it got opened after the war. This was the reminder to myself to also talk about downstate particularly. Some of the parks got used as prisoner of war camps, and some of them were used as refugee camps. Just kind of depended on which park it was and what the purpose was. And then also some of them were used as staging grounds for our troops leaving. So 1950s, there's that thing that they talked about a while ago. And it suddenly is how everybody gets to a park. So automobiles became huge. The war was over. Many parks experienced record-breaking attendance days. So remember, 1942, we dropped, 1942, we dropped to about 10 million people. By 1959, we were back up at 27 million people. So big, big boosts. New York State Park celebrated its 30th anniversary. They had a very swanky logo. Other things that were happening in the area, the St. Lawrence Seaway began being constructed in 1954. There were two parks, Wellesley Island State Park and Robert Moses State Park, that were on opposite ends of that seaway, designed to attract people to it. So they were established. And then the Student Conservation Association is also founded by Liz Putnam. This is down on Long Island. Many happy beachgoers. In the 1960s, so the boomers all had children, and state parks were actually, so the war had the boomers, there we go. State parks became an affordable option for travelers looking to keep their expenses low. So it was relatively cheap to go to a park and entertain your kids for the day. After World War II, there was a particularly big push to offer more rec activities during the winter. So it's still true today. It was true then, it's true today. Summer is always the biggest season for parks. We just call it the season. From Memorial Day to Labor Day, it is chaos in a park. Very happy chaos, but chaos. So one of the things that they were doing was pushing things like ice skating or cross-country skiing, or Bear Mountain opened a ski resort. They were just trying to get people outside in the wintertime to kind of stabilize parks, because parks would be really popular and then there'd be no one. And then they'd be really popular and then there'd be no one. So the push to get parks open in the wintertime was kind of to make that curve a little bit more graceful. Keyen, which is this kind of named drawing. The mansion was acquired in 1962. This is one of the locations for Choose Your Own Adventure later in the talk. But this was acquired and Parks headquarters was moved here. Okay, 1970s. Rock Island Lighthouse became part of the Thousand Islands region. It was decommissioned from being an aid to navigation and became a park. And then also, who's been down to Syracuse and gone to the state fair? I see smiles. Okay, you guys aren't raising your hands, but that's pretty close. So the state park at the fair has a reflecting pool and a mini golf course, and it's in the heart of the fairgrounds down in Syracuse. It's also our smallest park. It's like a little thimble, but it's really fun to go to. But this gets added to the list. In the 1980s, we got like a pretty important friends group. So there were a group of advocates that got together in 1985 in February or March, and they decided that parks really needed a group to advocate for them. So the New York Parks and Conservation Association was born. Keep that mouthful in your mind. It will come up on the next slide. Other things that happened: New York hosted the 13th Olympic Winter Games in Lake Placid, and the Miracle on Ice happened. And then this is just, there is no photo more 80s to me. Yeah. Okay, so in the 90s, I didn't include the 90s, Governor Pataki had a big effort to increase the number of parks downstate. There wasn't too much that happened in our region up here, but there was quite a bit moving on downstate. And then the mouthful, New York Parks and Conservation Association, rebranded to Parks and Trails New York, which if you've participated in I Love My Park Day, they're the ones who run that. If you've done a first day hike, they're the ones who run that. If you've been on biking and running trails across the state, they are generally the ones who make the maps for that. So they're a really important partner group for parks. The other thing that happened in 2004 is that Whaley State Park was open to the public. So this was originally, it's really known for these great cliffs on Lake Ontario, but it was a rifle range from the late 1800s to 1947. And then it was purchased by Nagle and Whaley. And then Whaley's son, when he passed, arranged for it to be sold to parks in 2002, and then opened for public in 2004. Any dog lovers in the audience? Yes, I see hands. Okay, this is a great park to take your dogs to because Whaley raised English setters. So you'll see statues of the dogs all over the park, and all the trails are really fun to run dogs around on. They still have to be on a 6-foot leash.
The name of the state, the name of the kennel that he had for those dogs was called Elview,
Yes.
which is Whaley spelled backwards.
Okay.
He also did those sculptures himself.
He did, yes.
There was the Elview kennels and it's Whaley spelled backwards.
Well, I learned something new today. That's really cool. Yeah. Thank you for that tidbit. I'm going to add that to my notes so that I can dazzle people with it later. Okay. And then we've got another I Love My Parks Day. 2010, Black River Trail opens in Watertown. Most people don't realize that this is part of parks, but it is. It's converted from an old railroad bed, and the trail follows the Black River for about 3.5 miles. Lots of opportunities on this trail. It's open year-round, and it keeps getting extended a little bit farther and a little bit farther and a little bit farther. So you can go farther and farther and farther between Black River and Watertown. The other thing that happened in 2015, the SCA and New York State together launched the Excelsior Conservation Corps. So this program existed pretty much until the pandemic. And then the Excelsior Corps kind of collapsed after that. There are 3 different corps in New York State, or there were. There was the Excelsior Corps, the New York State Parks Corps, and the Hudson River Corps. The only one that's really up and functioning right now is the New York State Parks Corps. So if you see any AmeriCorps members around our area, they're probably part of that. And then we get to today. So this year is the 100th anniversary of the State Council of Parks. And there's all sorts of different activities going on all over the state, and there have been all year long. If you see the slogan, "We'll see you out there," that's the thing this year. Is trying to get people to be out there because it's been 100 years. It's been pretty successful, and we're looking forward to the next 100. So in the back of the room, unless you're already doing this, in which case, well done. But in the back of the room, there is the Centennial Challenge. So there are 100 different activities. If you do 24 of them, and then you submit your fancy checklist, which they're back there, you can get entered to win all sorts of fun swag. If you are more comfortable with your phone, there's an app called Goose Chase that you can download. You can submit photos that way. Things that are up for grabs, there are t-shirts, there are water bottles, there are tote bags, there are stickers, there are Empire passes, which get you into all the parks. So these things are all really fun. Plus, the Centennial Challenge checklist is just kind of a fun way to interact with parks, because some things are like, do a geocache. Some things are take your dog on a walk. Also, it launched this year at Point Roche Nature Center, but next year we're hoping it will launch the other ones. We're doing bark rangers. So your dogs assign a thing and they get their photo featured at the nature center. But they will abide by the rules and they get a little tag to say that they're a bark ranger and a very cute neckerchief.
Uh-oh.
Really?
Bark rangers. They're very good about keeping their humans on a leash.
Really?
The other one is share your story. So this one, the flyers are also in the back. There are also temporary tattoos and stickers, depending on what you like. But share your story is this initiative of getting the stories that you have of the parks out there. So like my family story that we submitted is that my grandmother burned the tent stakes and then we couldn't pitch the tent. So it made for a very short camping trip, but it was very memorable. So there are different ways to share it. You can either share it through stories at parks.ny.gov or the flyers are in the back. Okay, this is your intermission. And then we will come back and we will do choose your own adventure. But if you need to stand up and stretch, if you need to use the washroom, it is 4 minutes after. So we'll say we'll reconvene at 9 minutes after. Okay, thank you. It's just a 5 minute break. Are you ready? It's just a 5 minute break. It's downtown by Henderson. By Henderson. It's downtown by Henderson. It's how are you? Yes.
I remember reading about the dog.
Yeah.
So Whaley also started something called sporting.
Yes. I didn't know that. I don't know why I never put that together.
They were all invited to come to my river. We had to bring you out to the river.
It's an EC on the Adirondack Park. So, I mean, we do talk about it. It's not part of
And the
it.
tiki bar next to it. Right in the tiki bar.
Yeah. Well, and it's so, I mean, the Adirondack Park is like this great experiment in itself because we're actually trying to live it. And then Yeah. some of that and then church park now.
Yeah.
You know, the job is not the same day to day. I like getting new things each day. Much is a different time.
I have to wait 6 weeks. I can remember when I was. Well, you know, all my yeah.
Every once in a while, the screen goes black and like it's all right, class, how are we going? 1 minute warning.
And it said, it's 70s. Good. That's what it said. But they didn't do work until later. So it was
Yeah, they got established as a state park, I think in 76.
yeah. Now we all went, enjoyed it, and then when they started. Those who live nearby.
Yeah.
But it's. Money, I guess. That's what people have decided. Visiting.
Yep, and you can go up in the Lighthouse.
Yeah.
All right,
It's nice.
it is. Sorry.
Great.
Everybody ready for choose your own adventure?
Yep.
All right, so I have selected a few parks that you can travel to by boat or nature centers within parks. They are, I guess I could have chosen higher contrast from here and ignore the green one up there. That's the one that I didn't get to this year. But so we've got the yellow stars all across. And this is the bit where you tell me what we're going to talk about. So we've got Sackett Harbor Battlefield, Burnham Point, Cedar Point, Rock Island Lighthouse, Mack Nature Center, Keyen, and Crane Point. Where would you like to go?
Canoe Point.
Canoe Point.
It's not on your list.
Can I edit it? Hit it? Hold on. Is this gonna help them?
And that's the only way you get to it. Correct? Is the
Cedar?
Canoe Point a state park?
Canoe Point. Wait, Canoe Point's not on the list.
No, it's not on the list.
You gotta pick one that's on the list. Cedar Island? Cedar Point?
Yeah, Cedar Island is in J.
Well, yeah, but don't ignore that one. I was not there.
So you don't have, to. I'm just saying.
Pick a different.
Rock Island.
Rock Island, all right, there we go.
Rock-
Thank you. Audience participation, hold on.
Oh, cool.
Okay, so Rock Island Lighthouse, we were just talking about this. It was first constructed in 1848 as an aid to navigation in the St. Lawrence River. There were 3 lighthouses that were authorized at the time. So we've got Rock Island Lighthouse, Crossover Island Light, and Sunken Rock Lighthouse. The original structure, which you can see in this etching, I think it's an etching, was constructed as the building, and then they put the light right on top of it. In 1882, they moved the light off the top of it and put it next to it. And then in 1889, the A.E. Vickery could not see the light, or the pilot was perhaps intoxicated, or perhaps there was fog. No one's quite sure what myth is there. But the A.E. Vickery sank. And if you're a scuba diver, you can still go out and see it today. And they moved the tower out on this walkway, catwalk thing. But it was only this big. So they moved it in 1903. And then shortly thereafter, they went, you know, we really need to lift that and make it taller. So it's used as an official aid to navigation until 1958, at which point it was decommissioned. They took the lens out of the lighthouse and they replaced it with a smaller version. The original one you could see, I think it's 6 miles is how far you could see it. But it has a much smaller one in it now. The Office of Parks, Recreation, and Historic Preservation assumed control of the property in 1976, and it was open to the public shortly thereafter. One of the fun facts about this lighthouse is that it is one of the few, it's the only one in the St. Lawrence, and one of the few that as a general member of the public, you can go up and you can stand where the light was. Who's been here? Yeah, I see lots of hands. Excellent, excellent. Okay. This is also, I used to take kids on field trips to this, and it was a delight because they would walk up the spiral staircase inside, and you could hear them like seeing if they could get their voices to echo while they're going up, and then they get up there and they're like, whoa, you can see a long way. The other fun fact is that if you are standing in the light, you are at the same elevation as the ships going by. You can wave at the crew. Incentive to go, see?
The other fun fact is it's hotter than you know what up there in August and July.
It sure is. Yes. Yes, it is. It is roasty toasty up there. Okay, where are we going next?
Cedar Point.
Cedar Point. I can find my mouse again. Okay, so Cedar Point is established. This is a different picture of the St. Lawrence Reservation, but Cedar Point is established in 1898 as part of the St. Lawrence Reservation. It is one of the oldest parks. This, similar to Mary's and Burnham, was the movement was already happening before it was established as a park in 1898. The pavilion that you can see the inside of here is constructed by the Civilian Conservation Corps in the 30s. We are working on a nice plaque to go in this building. It's not there yet, but it's actually on this computer. And then, thanks to the glorious world of the internet, I was able to research and find this image. So this was actually shot in about 1910, and it's kind of fun to look at because you can see they had something sitting here on this structure that kind of got blurry because the shutter speed was slow, and then there's also a woman sitting here at the table. Cedar Point was also a spot where they did shore dinners. So, yeah. Who's been to this one? About an equal number of fans. Okay. Good. You've been there. All right. Where's your next? Zachary Harbor. All right. Who is the history buff? In the room. Okay, where'd he go? We have these problems. Okay. Second Harbor Battlefield is a state historic site. It's the one state historic site in our region. It's a priority 1 principal site for the War of 1812, which basically means it's a big deal. Who's familiar with the War of 1812? Okay, I told you there was going to be a pop quiz. Who was it fought between? Yeah, the Brits and the US. So this is kind of the Second Revolutionary War. It is also a war that didn't really have to be fought because there was a letter that got sent from Europe that said, we don't really want to fight this war. They put it in the post and they sent it across. At the same time, the US sent a letter that said, you keep stealing our sailors, knock it off or we will declare war. And they put it in the post and sent it. And the one that said we declare war got there first. So we had a war. Sackett's Harbor, the first battle of Sackett's Harbor was fought in 1812, July of 1812. Most of the soldiers for the army would have been wearing these white uniforms. Difficult to keep clean in the muddy conditions. The second battle of Sackett's Harbor is fought in May of 1813. This one is actually a bit bigger. May of 1813, the British forces landed on Horse Island, marched across the little slightly shallower shoaly area. Their objective was to burn the stores at the shipyard because it's the War of 1812. If you have ships, you have power. And they had a big shipyard here in Sackett's. So they were going to burn the stores, burn the ships that were there. They started marching. They walked between the barracks. It's bayonet fighting. It's quite a gruesome battle. And there is a young shipwright apprentice who goes, oh my God, the British are coming. I'm going to light the stores on fire. And the British see, well, it's on fire. Our objective is achieved. And so they leave. And then the American forces are like, quick, put it out, put it out, put it out. So after the war, the barracks that were there get burned down because they were disease-ridden. And the Navy establishes a post that is there until the 1860s. The two buildings, the two yellow buildings on site are officers' housings. It's the lieutenant and the commandant. You can still tour the commandant's house. And the army moves over to Madison Barracks. Camp Pine is established and then gets moved out to what is now Fort Drum. It's a pretty interesting history of the area. You can tour, the site is open year round. The buildings are mostly open in the summertime. One of the fun facts, you can only see, this is the commandant's house. So you can see the windows over here. If you are on site and you look at the building that all the offices are in and where the gift shop is, there are no windows on the side of the building because a lower ranking officer can't look on the house of the higher ranking officer. Yeah. All right, where to next? Burnham. I'm gonna find it. There we go. Okay, this is also, I love this photo. Early shore dinners. Also established as part of the St. Lawrence Reservation. So Burnham is one of the original ones established a little bit before 1898. Until 1924, Burnham Point is only accessible by boat. So it is heavily used by fishermen for shore dinners. After 1924, there was a road built so that you could get to the park by automobile. One of the fun things about this park now is that it is a great launching point. You can get to Cape Vincent easily, you can get to Clayton easily, you can go over to Grindstone. It's just a really good launch point to see a lot of the Thousand Islands. And you can also get to a lot of different historic sites. And I just love this photo. He's got his basket. He's got some sort of little oven thing going. Seems like a great picnic. Where to? Wait. All right. I know I should have put the buttons bigger and like in the center so it'd be easier to get to them. Okay, so Keyen is where our regional headquarters are. Keyen, depending on the translation of the word, either means northwest wind or home of the winds. And it was constructed in 1893. In the 1940s, it was turned into a social club and a vacation camp. And then in 1965, it became part of Parks. It looked like this photo down here. There was quite a bit of discussion about whether they were going to refurbish the inside and fix everything, or if they were going to tear down the mansion. Ultimately, it was decided to tear down most of the mansion, though there are bits of it that still stand, and do a more modern build, which is the building that's there today. But the big reason for it was that when it was a social club and a vacation camp, the inside got pretty well damaged, which is unfortunate. Headquarters for Parks was originally in the hospital building, the original building of the House of the Good Samaritan. So it moved from Watertown out to Keyen. Yeah. And then this is, if you were down in the marina looking up, this is the little turret that's kind of down by the water. That's where all of our gardening things are, in case you wanted to know what was in that building. And there are lots of pavilions like this that are scattered around down by the water that are really lovely to walk to. There's also a brand new rock wall so that you can get down there safely that our trails crew finished yesterday. Very exciting. So that kind of takes you from the headquarters building down to the water so that you can get to these two easier. And the wildflowers in the spring are great. Yeah. Any questions about Keyen? Okay. Where'd you?
Nature Center.
Okay. So I worked at the Nature Center for 4 years, and it is very near and dear to my heart. Excuse me. Minna has made an appearance. She's on this photo there. But it's named for Minna Anthony Kama, who from 1925 to 1950 published articles in the Watertown Daily Times about flora and fauna found in the region. She was an early conservationist and also a naturalist, and was just kind of the leading authority on whatever you saw outside. One of the most charming things is that she loved to draw chickadees. And so she would go out on the trails and she would do little pen drawings of chickadees. But you can see them in the nature center today, and sometimes the chickadee will be perched and it has like a little sunflower seed in its toes. So it's kind of fun to see her work. It offers diverse programming focused on environmental education, open year-round, though if you go when the school groups are there, be warned, there are up to 60 or 80 children running around. It's quite raucous, but a lot of fun. And it's the flagship nature center of the Thousand Islands region. So we have the 4 and then the 5th by the Power Authority. But this one is the one that's open year round. They offer guided hikes, guided kayak programs, the Voyager canoe, there's skiing, there's snowshoeing, and there are lots of exhibits about local flora and fauna. There are also exhibits about invasives, so you can learn about those. And they have live animals in this one. Yeah. And sometimes that fireplace is lit. Oh, but sometimes in winter. Questions about the Nature Center? Who's been to the Nature Center? Okay, like middle section here, you gotta get out there. All right.
It's hard to swim.
It's hard to swim. There's a bridge. Take a bridge to it.
No, I'm not there, to all the sites.
Oh, yes, that's true.
You get tired.
You do. It's fatiguing. Yes, I understand. You gotta stop and have a short dinner so that you have energy.
That's
for
right.
the next one.
We only got one more to go.
Green Point, right? Yep. All right. Jeez. Okay, so this one, also established as part of the St. Lawrence Reservation. It sits on a peninsula in the St. Lawrence River. It is probably one of the prettiest. They're all pretty, but this one is really pretty. One of the fun facts about this one is that if you're camping here, or if you work here, you can watch sun up over the bay, and then you can watch sun down over the river. So that's a really special thing about this park. The pavilion is made of Potsdam sandstone, which gives it this characteristic pinkish, whitish look. And it was built by the Civilian Conservation Corps. It's also a recreation building. And it's also got these rough cut logs here. And that's part of that park aesthetic of the 30s. Any questions about Crane? Who's been to Crane? Who's camped at Crane? Crane is also, yes,
Is it a good spot to launch kayaks as well? Like, do they have a launch for them?
yes, they do the launch. It's a smaller launch, but it's a pretty nice one.
Oh, good. Thank
Yeah. The Nature Center at MAC also has a really nice kayak launch, and they have an accessible kayak launch as well.
Awesome.
Yeah. Kind of at the spot, if you're familiar with that park, is where all the ice fishermen go out on Heel Bay. There's also an accessible launch there.
Oh, to kayak around Eel Bay?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
All right. So we've hit all of them, I think. Yeah. So on behalf of State Parks and of myself, thank you for coming out tonight. It's been a lot of fun touring you through the history and some of the different sites around. And if you have any questions or want to tell me any sort of stories that I will recycle and use in future presentations, feel free to come up and talk to me. So thank you.
The relationship between parks and DEC, because DEC has, is it competitive? Is it cooperative, collaborative?
So we started out as the same, under the same umbrella, and then they got split, I think, in the 60s. And it's usually pretty cooperative. I mean, Parks is definitely more focused on recreation, whereas DEC is more focused on enforcement. But the two agencies work really closely together, particularly when we're looking at like waterfront properties and things like that.
DEC stands for?
Department of Environmental Conservation. They don't have the OPRHP mouthful that we do.
Some people call them the bad guys.
Yeah, but they're really the good guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But they have some great camping facilities. I think that they've got some ski areas.
Yes.
You know, you mentioned golf courses and,
Yep.
and I don't think you have any ski areas, but they've got ski areas.
They have ski areas. We have ski areas downstate. The other thing is in Western New York, they have nature centers too. So it just kind of depends on where you are in the state. And if you're in the Adirondacks or the Catskills, that's all DEC. Yep. So kind of similar, but different. Yes.
I think you told us, and I probably forgot what you said, but when was the conservation or the reservation, St. Lawrence Reservation, established?
1898.
Okay, so all these things are happening at the same time that national parks develop.
Yeah, it's all concurrent. The only thing that really, well, maybe not the only thing, but one of the things that sets New York State aside is that they're developing state parks instead of national parks.
Right.
Yeah.
So what's the official name of the Adirondacks?
It is the Adirondack State Park, isn't it? Or is it the Adirondack Preserve?
It's a state park.
State
No,
Park.
it's not a state.
No, it's not a state
It's
park.
an agency, yeah.
That's why I'm asking, because
It's in the blue line, inside the blue line.
Inside the blue line.
APA.
It's own agency. I don't know. They're not part of parks, but that's a great question. Do you know?
I think it's Adirondack Park Preserve.
Park Preserve.
it's a National Historic Landmark, according to the internet.
Right.
Everybody.
It's fair.
Yeah.
All right.
Except, hold on a minute.
Yeah, yeah.
I guess this is the only way I can explain it. I have an advanced degree in park management.
Okay.
The history of parks all over this country is just happened the same way they happened in New York State. The state, they became a unit of some kind. Then parks developed. Then conservation split off. And then, so what I'm trying to point out is this is an interesting point in time, which you talked about very effectively from the late 1880s to the 1920s. And that's what the United States is known for internationally, for its park system.
Yes.
That's,
And lots of other countries model it off of this one.
the one name synonymous with the period he just mentioned is Theodore
Theodore
Roosevelt.
Exactly.
And different, you know,
Yeah.
And
Yes.
Bob Marshall.
And a lot of times, the eastern part of the United States is not given credit for that. Everybody wants to talk about the big picture parks
Yeah.
in the west.
Yeah.
And Mather and
So is New York State the first state to have state parks?
They established the first state park by establishing Niagara. Niagara Falls.
And did you say they were the first state to establish state park?
They committed to the state park plan first. So I would have to do more research to find out if we were actually the first, but they committed to the plan, like the government itself.
It's a
committed
great
to the plan.
system, and I mean, the government, the governors have been really supporting parks recently. In years past, they haven't been quite as supportive, but the last two or three governors, I think, maybe starting with Pataki, you know.
Yeah.
But actually, Andrew Cuomo did a ton,
Oh, yeah, he did.
absolute ton in the state of park.
He might have had some influence.
He had a lot of,
You know, he might have been influenced a lot to do that.
yeah.
One of the things that I didn't talk about in here is that the historic preservation park gets split off of parks for a while, and then it gets reincorporated in the 70s. So there's like a 40-year gap where they were their own thing, and historic sites were not included in parks because those weren't recreation. And then they got reincorporated later, which is why our name got longer. Yes,
How did visitation change during the pandemic?
skyrocketed.
Yeah, right.
Skyrocketed, yeah. But a lot of it, I mean, like, in some strange ways, it mimicked like other things that were going on. Like in World War II, there are different parts of the park that were still open and people could still access them, but they couldn't expect any park staff to be there. And that was similar to what we saw in the pandemic. I mean, I was working at the nature center and I was the only one going in because I was the one taking care of the animals, because the animals still needed to be fed. And then I ended up switching jobs at that point in time, but that's not really the point. But it was very, like, the visitation, if I was there and I was feeding the animals in the morning, you would see people going by like crazy because
You're outside.
we were all outside. Yeah, I mean, what else were we all gonna do? So definitely skyrocketed. And I think some of that, I think people kind of like rediscovered the outdoors during that, and so we still see a lot of it. Most of the campsites were completely full for a good portion of the summer, which is great for us. But if you're going expecting that you're gonna have like your campsite that you used to have and nobody would be your neighbors, that doesn't really happen as much anymore. Yeah, yes.
I have a lot of park management colleagues. New York is considered to be the front runner in park development and outdoor recreation in the United States.
Hey, that's a feather. Yeah. I didn't know that, but that's good. I would have, truthfully, I would have thought that would be more like Utah.
Yeah.
But it's nice to know that it is.
The population center didn't move
That's
west until
true.
later, and that's where the demand came for it, except for the national parks.
Yeah.
It's an interesting phenomenon.
Well, and some of the New York State parks are tiny, but they're really important to the communities that they're in. Like Green Lakes is not very big, but it's huge to the Fayetteville area. So,
Then we all have a thank you, Robert. Thank you to Robert Moses.
yeah, I mean,
A lot of people in New York State feel differently.
but he has 2 parks named after him. So
Yeah.
it's pretty good.
But the highway system wouldn't exist and the parks wouldn't exist.
Right.
Without him.
Yeah, in doing the research for this, I was surprised at how much parkways and parks are connected. That was really interesting. And the person who saw it in the 20s and went, this is going to be big and we need to have roads. Like whoever that was, probably Robert Moses. It's just amazing to think about that development.
Yes, I'm thinking we didn't mention Grass Point State Park.
We didn't. It was very small.
It is, but it's.
But it's an important one. Yeah, and it's one of those that's small and important to the community that it's in.
Right.
Yeah, definitely.
Do you know any background on Waterston State Park? It's again, very small,
It is. It's still
pretty isolated.
for public use. I think it is still boat accessible only.
Yeah.
The facts that are coming to my brain are not terribly useful for you right now because I'm thinking about like how many campsites there are and where the washrooms are and how you get there to make sure that the trash gets hauled out of there. But It was also, Waterson was an estate that got converted over, similarly to the ones developed in 1898. It's a little bit later. I think it's in like the 1910 realm that it gets established. And grass is then, and there's another one, Long Point is also like 1910-ish.
What was the last one?
Long Point, the one out on Point Peninsula. There's a park out there. Oh no! They have cliff swallows. It's very fun to watch them fly around. All right, well, thank you. Thanks for coming. Thanks for staying.